Every high school has traditions, and El Paso High has the graduation walk, a path through the main hallway where graduating seniors walk in their caps and gowns on the last day of school. The hallway is lined with photos of every graduating class since 1916. Hundreds of faces watching from the walls. I took the night guard job right after the 2024 graduation, and the building felt different after all the students left for summer quieter. Emptier. But on my fifth night, at exactly 11:47 p.m., I heard footsteps in the main hallway. The distinct sound of dress shoes on tile, slow and measured, like someone walking in a ceremony. I checked the security cameras first, and that's when I saw them. A line of people in graduation robes walking single file down the main hallway. At least 30 of them, maybe more. They walked slowly, formally, like they were in a procession. I couldn't see their faces under the caps, but something about the way they moved felt wrong. Too stiff, too synchronized, like puppets being pulled by the same string. I went to the hallway to investigate, but by the time I got there, it was empty. The only thing left behind was a single graduation program on the floor, yellowed and brittle with age. When I picked it up, I saw the date, June 1967, and every name on the program had been crossed out in red ink. My name is Daniel Vasquez, and I've lived in El Paso my whole life. I graduated from Bowie High back in 2019, worked construction for a few years, then took this guard position when my Uncle Luis mentioned the opening. The pay was decent, $18 an hour for basically sitting in an empty building from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The job came with a radio, a flashlight, and a binder of protocols that the day supervisor, Mrs. Caldwell, handed me on my first shift. "Just follow these," she said, tapping the binder with one finger. "They're old policies, but administration wants them followed exactly. Don't skip anything." I flipped through the binder that first night. Most of it was standard stuff. Check all exterior doors, log any maintenance issues, test the fire alarms on Thursdays. But there was a separate section, printed on different paper, older paper, that had yellowed around the edges. The heading read, "Special Protocols, Main Building After Hours." 7 rules, numbered and specific. At the time, I figured they were just outdated safety procedures from decades ago. That was before the footsteps, before I found the program, before I understood that some traditions at El Paso High don't end when the students leave. They just wait for everyone else to go home. The building sits on Schuster Avenue, right in the heart of downtown. Built in 1916, it's the oldest high school in El Paso still in use. The architecture is beautiful. Red brick, arched windows, the kind of place that looks like it belongs in a history book. During the day, it's full of noise and movement. At night, it's mine to watch. Just me and whatever walks those halls after midnight. I called Mrs. Caldwell the next morning, right after my shift ended at 6. The sun was already heating up the asphalt on Schuster Avenue, and I sat in my truck in the parking lot, staring at the yellowed program in my hands. "Mrs. Caldwell, I found something weird last night. An old graduation program from 1967. All the names are crossed out." There was a pause on the other end. "Where did you find it?" "Main hallway. I saw people on the cameras, walking. But when I got there, just this program." Another pause. Longer this time. "Did you read the protocols I gave you?" "Some of them. The basic stuff. Read the special protocol section, all of it. Tonight, before your shift." Her voice had changed, gotten quieter. "And Daniel, don't deviate from them. Not even a little." She hung up before I could ask anything else. I drove home to my apartment on Trowbridge Drive, tried to sleep. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those figures in graduation robes, moving in perfect unison down the hallway. At 3 in the afternoon, I gave up on sleep and opened the protocols binder. The special protocols section was 7 pages, each rule printed in faded typewriter ink. Someone had gone over the text with a pen at some point, making certain words darker, more prominent. The paper smelled like old books and something else, something chemical, like developing fluid from a darkroom. Protocol 1. Between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., never enter the main hallway between 11:45 p.m. and 12:15 a.m. If you hear footsteps during this time, remain in the security office with the door closed. Do not watch the security monitors. Do not investigate. Protocol 2. If you find any graduation programs, yearbooks, or class photographs in the hallways after hours, do not touch them. Mark the location with masking tape and report it in the morning log. Under no circumstances should these items be removed from where you find them. Protocol 3. The auditorium doors must remain locked after 10 p.m. If you find them open, close them immediately, but do not enter the auditorium. If you hear music or voices from inside, proceed directly to the security office and wait until the sounds stop. Protocol 4. Room 237 on the second floor is to remain locked at all times. Do not enter this room for any reason. If the door is found open, close it from the hallway. Do not look inside. Do not turn on the lights. Protocol 5. If you encounter anyone in the building after hours claiming to be a student, teacher, or administrator, politely inform them the building is closed and escort them to the nearest exit. Do not ask them their name. Do not engage in extended conversation. If they refuse to leave or mention the year 1967, return to the security office immediately. Protocol 6. The graduation photos in the main hallway sometimes change. If you notice faces looking in different directions or expressions that seem different from earlier checks, this is normal. Continue your rounds. Do not stare at the photographs for more than a few seconds at a time. Protocol 7. If you see a group of people in graduation robes at any time during your shift, do not approach them. Do not speak to them. If they approach you, recite the following. The ceremony is complete, you may proceed. Then turn and walk away at a normal pace. Do not run. I read through the protocols 3 times, my coffee getting cold on the kitchen counter. The last page had a handwritten note at the bottom, the ink slightly smeared. These rules were established following the incident of June 1967. Compliance is mandatory for night staff safety. Previous guards who failed to follow protocols are no longer employed. Please take this seriously. J.R. Mendoza, Principal, 1968 to 1982. I took a photo of each page with my phone. Something about having a digital backup made me feel better, even though I didn't understand why I'd need one. That evening, I stopped at the L&J Cafe on East Missouri for dinner before my shift. The waitress, an older woman named Gloria who'd worked there for 30 years, noticed my El Paso High security uniform. "You working nights at the high school?" she asked, refilling my water. "Yeah, started last week." She set the pitcher down, her expression shifting. "My cousin worked there in the 80s, night guard like you. He quit after 3 months. Never told us why, but he wouldn't drive past the building after dark, not even to visit family on that side of town." "Did he say what happened?" Gloria shook her head. "Just said some buildings remember things they shouldn't. Said El Paso High remembers everything." If you like the stories, please hype the videos from a button like this just above the comment section. It helps the videos to get more reach and perform well. It would take just a few seconds and cost nothing, but would help the channel grow even faster. Thank you. I arrived at the school at 9:45 p.m., 15 minutes early. The building looked different at night. The exterior lights cast shadows across the red brick facade, making the arched windows look like hollow eye sockets. I parked in my usual spot near the maintenance entrance and sat for a moment, watching the building. Mrs. Caldwell's car was still in the lot. She usually left by 9. I found her in the security office, a small room near the main entrance with 6 monitors showing different areas of the school. She was standing in front of the screen displaying the main hallway, her arms crossed. "You read them?" she asked without turning around. "All 7 protocols. I have questions." "I'm sure you do." She finally looked at me. Mrs. Caldwell was in her mid-50s, a former teacher who'd moved into administrative work after her husband died. She had kind eyes usually, but tonight they looked tired. "Ask, what happened in 1967? "Graduation ceremony, June 3rd. 34 students were supposed to walk that day." She gestured to the monitor. "They walked down that hallway, same as every class before them. But there was a gas leak in the auditorium. Old heating system, faulty valve. Nobody knew until it was too late." "They died?" "All 34, plus 3 teachers and the principal. The ceremony was packed. Parents, siblings, everyone. The whole community was there." She sat down in the office chair, suddenly looking older. "The school district covered it up, called it a tragic accident, paid settlements to the families, sealed all the records. They renovated the auditorium, replaced the entire heating system, and pretended it never happened. The official story was that the ceremony was canceled due to a gas leak that was discovered and fixed. Nobody died, according to the public record. But they did. They did. And they've been walking that hallway every night at 11:47 p.m. ever since. That's when the ceremony was scheduled to begin." She pulled out a folder from the desk drawer, opened it to show me newspaper clippings. "These are from the El Paso Herald-Post, June 1967. Notice anything?" I scanned the articles. Coverage of other news. Vietnam, local politics, high school sports. Nothing about El Paso High's graduation. "There's nothing here." Exactly. The district bought the silence, but the families knew. Some of them still know, and the building knows. She closed the folder. Room 237 was where they stored the bodies before the coroner could take them. That's why it stays locked. What about Protocol 5? If they mention 1967, then they're not confused visitors. They're looking for something. Recognition, maybe, or revenge. She stood up, collected her purse. "Daniel, I hired you because your uncle vouched for you. Said you were smart, level-headed. I need you to stay that way. Follow the protocols exactly as written. Don't try to be a hero. Don't try to communicate with them beyond what Protocol 7 instructs. And for God's sake, don't go into that hallway between 11:45 and 12:15. "You broke Protocol 2, I said. I touched the program, picked it up. Her face tightened. "I know. That's why I'm telling you all this now. You already made contact even if you didn't mean to. They know you're here. They know you see them." She headed for the door, then stopped. "If things get bad tonight, call me. Not 911. Me. The police won't help with this." She left me alone in the security office. I spent the first hour of my shift doing normal rounds, checking doors, testing locks, marking off items on the checklist. The school felt different knowing what I knew now. Every classroom I passed, I wondered if students from that 1967 class had sat in those desks. Every hallway seemed longer, darker. At 11:30 p.m., I was on the second floor, near room 237. The door was open. I stopped walking. Protocol 4 was clear. The door should always be locked. If found open, close it from the hallway. Don't look inside. Don't turn on the lights. I approached slowly. The door had swung inward about 6 inches, just enough to create a gap. The room beyond was dark, but I could see the outline of old desks stacked against the far wall, covered with dust sheets. I reached for the door handle, keeping my eyes on the hallway floor, not looking inside like the protocol instructed. My fingers wrapped around the cold metal. Then I heard it. Crying. Soft, muffled. Coming from inside the room. A girl's voice. Young. "I can't find my parents. They were supposed to be here." My hand stayed on the door handle. Protocol 4 said to close the door. It didn't say anything about voices. But Protocol 5 covered encounters. Don't engage in extended conversation. "The building is closed," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You need to leave." "I can't leave. Not until after the ceremony. Have you seen my parents? Mr. and Mrs. Delgado? They were sitting in the 3rd row." 1967. She was from 1967. I pulled the door closed quickly, hearing the lock click into place. The crying stopped immediately, cut off like someone had pressed the mute button. My watch read 11:38 p.m. 7 minutes until the procession started. I walked quickly to the stairs, heading back to the 1st floor. Behind me, I heard a door open. The same sound of room 237's hinges. I didn't look back. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my boots echoing in the stairwell. The security office door was glass, reinforced but still transparent. I could see the monitors from inside. At 11:44 p.m., I turned off the overhead lights like Protocol 1 suggested, keeping only the desk lamp on the monitors cast a blue glow across the small space. 11:45 p.m. I turned away from the monitor showing the main hallway, focusing on the others instead. The cafeteria, the gymnasium, the library, all empty, all normal. Then I heard them. Footsteps, dress shoes on tile, slow, measured, the same rhythm as a processional march, the kind they play at graduations. Left, right, left, right. Dozens of feet moving in perfect synchronization. I kept my eyes on the cafeteria monitor. The footsteps grew louder. They were in the main hallway now, just beyond the security office door. Through the glass, I could see shadows moving past, backlit by the emergency exit signs. Don't look. Don't watch the monitors. The footsteps continued. I counted them, keeping my breathing even. 34 students, 3 teachers, 1 principal. 38 pairs of feet. 38 people who died on what should have been the proudest day of their lives. The procession passed the security office. I heard them turn the corner, heading toward the auditorium. The footsteps faded, growing distant, then silent. My watch read 11:52 p.m. I waited until 12:15, exactly as Protocol 1 instructed, before I moved. When I finally stepped out of the security office at 12:16 a.m., the hallway was empty. The emergency exit signs cast their usual red glow, and the building had settled back into its normal nighttime quiet. I checked the main hallway first, shining my flashlight across the polished tile. Nothing. No footprints, no graduation programs, no sign anyone had been there. But the air smelled different, like old paper and something floral. Corsages, maybe, the kind girls wore to proms and graduations. The scent faded as I walked, dissipating like perfume in wind. I continued my rounds, checking the East Wing classrooms. Everything was locked, secure. At 1:30 a.m., I circled back to check the auditorium doors. They were open. Both main doors stood wide, propped with the rubber stoppers usually kept in the janitor's closet. Through the gap, I could hear music. Faint, scratchy, like it was playing from an old record player. Pomp and circumstance, the traditional graduation march. Protocol 3. Close the doors immediately. Don't enter. If you hear music or voices, go to the security office and wait. I grabbed the right door first, pulling it closed. The music continued. I reached for the left door, and that's when I saw them. Rows of people sitting in the auditorium seats, graduation robes, caps, all facing forward toward the stage, where a man in a suit stood behind a podium. I could see them clearly in the dim emergency lighting, hundreds of people filling every seat. The man at the podium was speaking, but I couldn't make out the words. His mouth moved, forming sounds that didn't quite reach me. The audience sat perfectly still, not a single person turning to look at the open doors. I pulled the left door closed. The latch clicked. The music stopped immediately, cut off mid-note. My hands were shaken. I walked back to the security office, my flashlight beam jumping across the walls. Inside, I sat down and pulled out my phone, nearly calling Mrs. Caldwell. But what would I say? That I followed the protocols? That's what I was supposed to do. I pulled up the photo I'd taken of the 1967 graduation program instead. 34 names, all crossed out in red ink. I started reading them. Patricia Delgado, Ramon Herrera, Julia Escontrias, Thomas Whitaker, Sofia Marquez, Daniel Ortega. I stopped at that last name. Daniel Ortega. Same first name as me. On impulse, I opened a browser on my phone and searched El Paso High School 1967 gas leak. The first few results were generic school history pages. Nothing specific. I added graduation to the search. One result appeared, buried on the third page. A digitized newspaper article from the El Paso Herald-Post, dated June 15, 1967. 2 weeks after the supposed ceremony, the headline read, "Families demand answers after gas leak tragedy." The article was brief, only 3 paragraphs. It mentioned a routine maintenance issue at El Paso High School that had been safely resolved. It said the graduation ceremony had been postponed due to weather concerns and would be rescheduled at a later date. Nothing about deaths. Nothing about 38 people dying in that auditorium. But the comments section, added when the paper digitized its archives, told a different story. My aunt was there. She was supposed to graduate that day. Her name was Patricia Delgado. She never came home. Posted by Monsieur Delgado, 2019. This article is a lie. They died. All of them. My grandfather was one of the teachers. The district paid us to stay quiet. Posted by Anonymous, 2020. I was 12 when this happened. I remember the funerals, closed caskets, all of them. My older sister was in that class. The school made it disappear from history, but we remember. Posted by G. Escontrias, 2021. I took screenshots of everything. At 2:15 a.m., I forced myself to do another round. The protocols didn't say I could hide in the office all night. I had to check the building. The second floor was quiet. I walked past room 237, noting that the door was still closed and locked. The classrooms were empty. I was heading back to the stairs when I noticed something on the wall. The graduation photos, the ones that lined the hallway, showing every class since 1916. I'd walked past them dozens of times during my shifts, barely glancing at them. Now I stopped in front of the 1967 photograph. It showed 3 rows of students in caps and gowns, smiling at the camera. The brass plaque beneath read, "Class of 1967, 34 graduates." I counted the faces in the photo. 34 students, arranged in neat rows. But something was wrong with their expressions. When I'd glanced at this photo before, during my first few shifts, I would have sworn they were smiling now. looking directly at it. None of them were smiling. They were all staring at the camera with blank faces. No expression at all. Like someone had told them to look forward but forgotten to tell them to smile. I took a step closer. The photograph was old, faded. But there was something else. In the back row, one of the students, I couldn't tell if it was a boy or girl because of the angle, was looking slightly to the left, away from the camera, looking at where I was standing now. I backed away from the photograph. Protocol 6 came back to me. The graduation photos sometimes change. Don't stare at them for more than a few seconds. I'd been staring for at least 30 seconds. I turned away, heading for the stairs. Behind me, I heard a sound like fabric rustling, graduation robes moving. I walked faster, not quite running, keeping my pace steady. The stairwell door was 20 feet away. 15, 10. The rustling got louder. I reached the door, pulled it open, stepped through. Let it close behind me. In the stairwell, everything was concrete and metal. Solid, real. I took the stairs down to the first floor, my footsteps echoing. On the landing between floors, I stopped. There was writing on the wall, scratched into the paint with something sharp. Fresh scratches, the exposed concrete beneath still bright white. They promised we would walk. They promised we would graduate. We're still waiting. Below that, a list of initials: PD, RH, JE, TW, SMDO, Daniel Ortega, the same name as mine. One of the 34. I took a photo of the writing, then continued down to the first floor. The main hallway stretched ahead, empty and silent. I checked my watch, 2:47 a.m. 3 more hours until sunrise. 3 more hours until Mrs. Caldwell arrived and I could leave. I went back to the security office and locked the door behind me. Through the monitors, I watched the empty hallways. The building looked peaceful, normal. Just an old high school in the middle of the night. But on the monitor showing the main hallway, I noticed something. The graduation photos on the walls were visible in the background. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting at the 1967 photograph. All 34 students were now facing the camera again. But this time, they were all looking down. At the floor. At the exact spot where I'd found the graduation program on my 5th night. The spot where something had been left for me to find. I pulled out my phone and called Mrs. Caldwell. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Daniel? What's wrong?" "I need to know something. The protocols. Who wrote them?" A pause. "The original ones were written by Principal Mendoza in 1968, the year after the incident. He was the assistant principal at the time he survived, because he was helping with parking outside when the gas leak happened. He blamed himself for not checking the heating system more carefully. Spent the rest of his career trying to keep the night staff safe." "Safe from what? Ghosts?" "From becoming part of it," she said quietly. 3 guards before you didn't follow the protocols. They tried to help. Tried to give the graduates what they wanted. Recognition, acknowledgement, a real ceremony. All 3 disappeared during their shifts. We found their uniforms in the main hallway, folded neatly. But no bodies, no signs of struggle, just empty uniforms and their name badges. "What were their names? Does it matter?" "Tell me." She sighed. "James Kowalski, 2003. Lisa Chen, 2011. Marcus Reeves, 2019. All 3 trying to complete the ceremony for them. None of them came back." I looked at the monitor again. The students in the photograph were still looking down at the floor. "What do they want?" I asked. "The same thing anyone wants," Mrs. Caldwell said. "To be remembered. to have their story told, to graduate. She hung up. I didn't sleep that day. Couldn't. I kept seeing those photographs, the way all 34 students had turned their heads in perfect unison. When I finally gave up on rest around noon, I drove to the El Paso Public Library on North Oregon Street. The library kept archives of local newspapers, some digitized, others still on microfiche. I signed in with the reference librarian, a woman in her 70s named Mrs. Ochoa, and asked for everything from June 1967. "Researching something specific?" she asked, leading me to the microfiche room. "El Paso High School. Just general history." She gave me a knowing look. "You're the third person this month asking about that school. Must be something in the water." She pulled out several boxes of film reels. "These are the Herald-Post archives, June through August 1967. Let me know if you need help with the machine." I spent 2 hours scrolling through newspaper pages. Most of it was routine: city council meetings, sports scores, advertisements for Fur's cafeteria, and the old popular dry goods store downtown. But on June 4th, 1967, there was a small article buried on page 8. "Gas leak forces evacuation at El Paso High School." The article was 3 paragraphs, deliberately vague. A maintenance worker had discovered a minor gas leak in the auditorium heating system. The building was evacuated as a precaution. The graduation ceremony scheduled for that evening was postponed. No injuries reported. The system was being repaired. I kept scrolling. June 5th, nothing. June 6th, nothing. Then on June 7th, another small article. "District announces changes to high school graduation schedule." El Paso High School's graduation ceremony would be rescheduled for a later date to allow families adequate planning time. The article mentioned that students would receive their diplomas by mail. No ceremony. No walk. Nothing. I scrolled forward through the rest of June, July, August. Not a single mention of the 34 students. No funerals. No obituaries. No memorial services. It was like they'd never existed. I photographed the articles with my phone, then returned the microfiche to Mrs. Ochoa. "Find what you needed?" she asked. More questions than answers. She smiled sadly. That's usually how it goes with that school. My husband's aunt worked there as a secretary, 1965 through 1970. She never talked about what happened in 67, but she kept a photograph of some students on her desk until she died young people in graduation robes. When I asked her about it once, she just said, "They never got to walk." "Do you remember any of their names?" "One girl, Patricia something, Spanish last name." My husband's aunt would talk to that photograph sometimes, late at night when she thought no one was listening. She'd say, "I'm sorry, Patricia. I'm so sorry." Patricia Delgado. The name from the program. The girl who'd left the comment on the digital article saying her aunt never came home. I thanked Mrs. Ochoa and left the library. Outside, the afternoon sun was brutal. The kind of dry heat that makes El Paso feel like the surface of Mars. I drove to the school district administration building on North Ochoa Street, parked, and went inside. The records office was on the second floor. A young clerk named Jennifer helped me, though she looked skeptical when I asked for graduation records from 1967. "Those would be pretty old. What exactly do you need?" "Class of 1967 from El Paso High. Graduation roster if you have it." She typed on her computer, frowning. "That's weird. I'm not seeing the graduation file for that year. We have 1966 and 1968, but 1967 is just missing from the database." "Could it be misfiled?" "Maybe. Let me check the physical archives." She disappeared into a back room. I waited 15 minutes before she returned carrying a slim manila folder covered in dust. Found this, but it's not much. Inside the folder was a single sheet of paper, a typed list of 34 names under the heading El Paso High School, class of 1967. No graduation date, no ceremony details, just names. Every single name matched the ones on the program I'd found. At the bottom of the page, someone had written in pen, "Ceremony canceled. Diplomas issued by mail. Files sealed per District Order 6723. "Can I get a copy of this?" I asked. Jennifer hesitated. "I'm not supposed to copy records without proper authorization, but..." She glanced at the door to make sure we were alone. "My grandmother went to El Paso High, class of 1968. She had a friend in the class before hers, a girl named Julia Escontrias. My grandmother said Julia disappeared right before graduation, just vanished. The school said she'd transferred, but my grandmother knew that was a lie. She made a copy of the page and handed it to me. Don't tell anyone where you got this." I drove back to my apartment with the copy on the passenger seat. The list of names felt heavier than paper should. These weren't just victims of an accident. They were people the district had erased, deliberately, systematically. That evening, I arrived at the school an hour early. Mrs. Caldwell's car was already in the lot. I found her in the main office, going through files. "You're early," she said, not looking up. "I went to the library, the district office, found some things." She closed the file cabinet. "Daniel, I hired you to watch the building, not investigate it. 3 guards disappeared. You said they tried to help the graduates. What did they actually do?" She sat down behind the desk, suddenly looking exhausted. "James Kowalski found old graduation records in the basement. He started calling families, trying to get them to come to the school for a memorial ceremony. He wanted to give the class of 67 a proper recognition. We found his uniform 2 weeks later, folded in the main hallway where the procession walks." "And the others?" "Lisa Chen brought in a minister, tried to hold a blessing ceremony in the auditorium. Marcus Reeves got permission from some of the surviving family members to hold a private graduation. Both of them disappeared during their shifts. We found their uniforms, their radios, their keys, but no bodies. What happened to them?" "I think they became part of the ceremony," Mrs. Caldwell said quietly. "I think the graduates took them. Not violently, not as revenge, but as participants. The ceremony needs witnesses. It needs people to acknowledge it, to make it real. When you try to give them what they want, you become part of it. You don't leave." "Then what am I supposed to do? Just watch them walk every night forever?" "You follow the protocols. You maintain boundaries. You acknowledge them when required, but you don't try to complete what was taken from them, because you can't. No one can give them back what they lost." She stood up. "The building remembers. The graduates remember. But you're alive, Daniel. You get to leave at 6 a.m. Don't give that up trying to be a hero." She left me alone in the office. At 10 p.m., I started my shift. I checked all the doors, tested the locks, logged everything properly. The building felt different tonight, heavier somehow, like the air itself had weight. At 11:30 p.m., I was on the second floor when I heard a sound from room 237. Knocking. 3 sharp raps on the door from inside. Protocol 4 said nothing about knocking, just that the room should stay locked. Don't enter. Don't look inside. The knocking came again. 3 raps, evenly spaced. Then a voice. Male. Young. "Is someone there? I think I'm locked in. Can you help me?" I stood in the hallway, staring at the door. My radio crackled with static. "Please," the voice said. "I need to get to the ceremony. I'm going to be late. My parents are waiting." 15 minutes until 11:47. 15 minutes until the procession. "The ceremony is complete," I said, reciting the words from Protocol 7. "You may proceed." The knocking stopped. The voice fell silent. I walked to the stairs, keeping my pace even, not running. Behind me, I heard the lock on room 237 click open. The door creaked. I didn't look back. I took the stairs down to the first floor and locked myself in the security office at 11:44 p.m. Through the glass door in the darkened hallway, I could see them gathering. 34 students in graduation robes. They formed their procession line, perfect and silent. And at the front of the line, someone new. A young man in the security guard uniform standing at attention. He looked exactly like the photograph I'd seen of James Kowalski in the old staff directory. He'd been missing for 21 years, but here he was, leading the procession. The graduates began to walk. I watched Kowalski lead the procession past the security office. He walked with perfect posture, his eyes straight ahead, wearing the same uniform style the school had issued in 2003 behind him. The 34 graduates followed in their robes, moving in synchronized steps. They weren't ghosts, not in the way I'd imagined ghosts would be. They looked solid, real. If I didn't know better, I'd think they were actual people walking through the school at midnight. The procession turned the corner toward the auditorium. I counted them as they passed. 34 students, 3 teachers, 1 principal, 1 security guard. 39 people in total now. The footsteps faded. I waited until 12:15 a.m. exactly before leaving the security office. The hallway was empty again, but this time, there was something on the floor near where the procession had walked. I approached carefully, my flashlight beam catching something white against the dark tile. A name badge. The clip-on kind the school had used in the early 2000s. James Kowalski, Night Security. I picked it up. The plastic was cold, the metal clip slightly rusted. This wasn't a copy or a prop. This was his actual badge, the one he'd been wearing the night he disappeared in 2003. I put it in my pocket. The rest of the shift was quiet. At 6 a.m., Mrs. Caldwell arrived to find me sitting in the security office, Kowalski's badge on the desk in front of me. She saw it, and her face went pale. "Where did you find that?" "Main hallway, after the procession. He's one of them now, leading them." She sat down slowly. I was afraid of that. When James disappeared, I hoped he'd just quit, run off. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. The other 2 guards, Lisa Chen and Marcus Reeves. Are they in the procession too? I don't know. I've never watched. The protocols say not to watch the monitors during that time, so I never have. She picked up the badge, turning it over in her hands. His wife still lives in El Paso, on Pershing Drive. She remarried 5 years ago, but she kept his last name. She deserves to know what happened to him. We can't tell her he's leading a procession of dead students every night at midnight. No. But we can tell her the truth about why he disappeared, about what the school has been hiding for 57 years. Mrs. Caldwell set the badge down. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. I didn't just hire you because of your uncle's recommendation. I hired you because you're young enough to do something about this, old enough to be believed, young enough to not be part of the district's institutional memory. They can't silence you the way they silenced us." "What do you mean?" She pulled out another file from her desk. This one was thick, stuffed with documents. "I've been keeping records. Everything about the class of 67 copies of the original incident reports. settlement agreements, sealed testimonies from families. The district ordered all physical copies destroyed in 1972, but the assistant superintendent at the time made duplicates. He gave them to my predecessor before he retired. She gave them to me, and now I'm giving them to you. I opened the file. The first document was a coroner's report, dated June 4th, 1967. It listed 38 deaths by carbon monoxide poisoning. Cause, faulty heating valve in the auditorium ventilation system. Time of death, estimated between 7:15 p.m. and 7:45 p.m. The graduation ceremony had been scheduled to begin at 7 p.m. They died during the opening processional, Mrs. Caldwell said. The gas had been leaking into the auditorium for hours, building up. When everyone was seated and the doors were closed, the concentration reached lethal levels. The students were walking down the aisle when it happened. That's why they keep walking every night. They're trying to finish what was interrupted. I kept reading. Settlement agreements with families, all dated within 2 weeks of the incident. Each one included a non-disclosure clause. The families received money, substantial amounts for 1967, in exchange for their silence. Not all families took the money, Mrs. Caldwell said. 3 refused. The Delgado family, the Escontrias family, and the Marquez family. They wanted the truth made public. The district threatened them with lawsuits, claiming they were spreading malicious lies about the school. Eventually, they were forced to stay quiet, but they never signed the agreements. So there are families who still want the truth told. Patricia Delgado's niece still lives in El Paso. She runs a restaurant on Donovan Drive. Julia Escontrias's nephew is a lawyer downtown. Sofia Marquez's great-niece teaches at Bowie High. They all know the stories their families pass down. They just don't have proof. She closed the file and pushed it across the desk to me. This is proof. Take it. Make copies. Give it to someone who can do something with it. A journalist, a historian, a lawyer, someone who can force the district to acknowledge what happened. What about you? You'll lose your job. I'm retiring next month anyway. I've spent 30 years working for a district that buried 38 deaths. I can live with losing a job. I can't live with keeping this quiet anymore. She stood up. The protocols keep you safe from them, but they also keep the secret safe. As long as we just follow the rules and never ask questions, the class of 67 stays forgotten. That's not protection. That's complicity. I took the file home that morning, spent the day reading every document, scanning every page. By evening, I had digital copies of everything stored in 3 different cloud accounts. Then I started making calls. The first was to Patricia Delgado's niece, Maria Delgado Torres. She owned a small restaurant called Delgado's Kitchen on Donovan. When I explained who I was and why I was calling, there was a long silence on the other end. My grandmother told me about Aunt Patricia, she finally said. She was 18, valedictorian, full scholarship to UTEP. My grandmother was 12 when it happened. She watched her sister leave for graduation and never saw her again. The school told them there was an accident, that Patricia had died, but they couldn't see the body, couldn't have a funeral. They gave my great-grandparents $5,000 and a piece of paper saying they couldn't talk about it. I have documents, proof of what really happened. The coroner's report, the settlement offers, everything. Send them to me. Please. I called Julia Escontrias's nephew next, an attorney named David Escontrias. He was cautious at first, skeptical. But when I mentioned I had the original incident reports, his tone changed. My father spent his entire life trying to get answers about his sister. He died in 2018 without ever knowing the full truth. If you really have those documents, I want to see them, and I want to use them. By the time my shift started that night, I'd spoken to 7 family members of the class of '67. All of them wanted the truth. All of them were ready to go public. I arrived at the school at 9:45 p.m. Mrs. Caldwell was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against her car. "I heard you've been making calls," she said. "Word travels fast. David Escontrius called the superintendent this afternoon, told him he has evidence of a district cover-up dating back to 1967. The superintendent called me 20 minutes ago, wanted to know if I'd been sharing confidential files with unauthorized individuals." She smiled. I told him I had no idea what he was talking about. "But Daniel, you need to be careful now. The district will try to bury this again. They'll claim the documents are fake, that you're making it up, that it's all ancient history that doesn't matter anymore. The families matter. They deserve the truth." "I agree. But watch your back and follow the protocols tonight, more than ever." She left, and I went inside to start my shift. The building felt different, heavier, like it knew something was changing. I did my first round, checking doors and windows. Everything was normal until I reached the main hallway. The graduation photos on the walls had changed again. The class of 1967 photograph now showed all 34 students looking directly forward at the camera. Their expressions were different than before. Not blank, not sad. They looked determined, focused, like they knew something was about to happen. At 11:30 p.m., I was in the second-floor hallway when I heard them knocking again. Room 237. 3 sharp raps. "I know you can hear me," a voice said from inside, female this time. "Thank you for calling Maria, my niece. Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her we're all proud. Patricia Delgado." It had to be. "I will," I said through the closed door. The knocking stopped. I went to the security office and locked myself in at 11:44 p.m. This time, I didn't look away from the monitors. I wanted to see them. Needed to see them. At 11:47 p.m., they appeared in the main hallway. 34 students in graduation robes, 3 teachers, 1 principal, James Kowalski in his security uniform, still leading them. But tonight, something was different. They weren't walking toward the auditorium. They were walking toward the main entrance, toward the doors, toward the outside world. The procession reached the main doors and stopped. They stood there facing the glass, like they were waiting for something. Then, one by one, they turned and looked directly at the security camera, directly at me. Patricia Delgado stepped forward from the line. She removed her graduation cap, and I could see her face clearly for the first time. Young 18. She looked like her niece Maria, the same eyes, the same determined expression. She raised one hand and pressed it against the glass door. The other graduates did the same, moving forward in a wave, all pressing their hands against the glass. 38 people, all reaching toward the outside, not trying to escape, not trying to leave, trying to be seen. The lights in the main hallway began to flicker. The emergency exit signs brightened, then dimmed, then brightened again, pulsing like a heartbeat. My radio crackled. Through the static, I heard music. Pomp and circumstance, faint and distant, playing from somewhere in the building. The graduates pulled their hands back from the glass and returned to their procession line. They turned and walked toward the auditorium, disappearing around the corner. The music faded. The lights stopped flickering. At 12:15 a.m., I left the security office and found something on the floor near the main entrance. 34 graduation programs, arranged in a perfect line. each one dated June 3rd, 1967. Each one with every name crossed out in red ink except one. Each program highlighted a different student. They were showing me their names, making sure I knew exactly who they were. I collected all 34 programs and brought them back to the security office, photographed each one, uploaded them to the cloud with all the other documents. These weren't just evidence anymore. They were testimony. The class of '67 was telling their story the only way they could, and I was going to make sure the world finally listened. The next morning, the El Paso Times ran a story. Not front page, but prominent enough. Families demand investigation into 1967 El Paso high school incident. David Escontrius had given them copies of some of the documents, not everything, just enough to raise questions. The district responded within hours with a statement calling the claims unsubstantiated and based on misinterpreted historical records. They said any incident in 1967 had been properly handled according to the standards of the time. But the families weren't backing down. Maria Delgado Torres held a press conference outside the school that afternoon. I watched it on my phone from my apartment. She stood on the sidewalk on Schuster Avenue, the red brick building looming behind her, and held up a photograph of her Aunt Patricia in her graduation robe. "My aunt was 18 years old," Maria said to the cameras. "She had her whole life ahead of her. The school took that from her, and then they tried to erase her from history. We want answers. We want accountability. And we want the district to finally tell the truth about what happened on June 3rd, 1967. By evening, the story had spread to the local news stations. Channel 7 sent a reporter to interview some of the families. Channel 9 dug up old archives showing the unexplained gap in El Paso High's graduation records. The superintendent issued another statement, this one more aggressive. He accused outside agitators of trying to damage the school's reputation with fabricated evidence and conspiracy theories. That's when David Escontrius released the coroner's report. 38 deaths. Carbon monoxide poisoning. June 3rd, 1967. All documented, all official, all bearing the seal of the El Paso County Medical Examiner's Office. The district couldn't deny it anymore. I arrived at work that night to find 2 district security officers waiting in the parking lot. They approached my truck before I could get out. Daniel Vasquez, one of them asked. He was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and a district badge clipped to his belt. "That's me." "We need you to come with us. The superintendent wants to talk to you." "I'm scheduled to work tonight." "Your shift has been suspended pending an investigation. You're accused of stealing confidential district files and sharing them with unauthorized individuals. That's grounds for immediate termination and possible criminal charges." I stayed in my truck. "I didn't steal anything. Mrs. Caldwell gave me public records that should have never been sealed in the first place." "Mrs. Caldwell has been placed on administrative leave. Now you can come with us voluntarily, or we can call the El Paso police and have you escorted." I thought about the 34 programs in my backpack, the photographs I'd taken, all the evidence stored in multiple cloud accounts where the district couldn't reach it. "I'll follow you," I said. "Let me lock my truck." They escorted me to the district administration building. The superintendent, a man named Dr. Warren Fletcher, met me in a conference room with the district's legal counsel present. They recorded everything. Fletcher was in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit. He looked like someone who'd spent his career managing problems, making them disappear. "Mr. Vasquez, you've created a significant issue for this district. You've shared sealed personnel files, confidential historical documents, and potentially fabricated evidence with outside parties. This is a serious breach of your employment agreement. The documents aren't fabricated, They're real, and they prove the district covered up 38 deaths. Those records, if they exist, are protected under privacy laws. The families involved signed agreements. You violated those agreements. 3 families never signed. They wanted the truth public. I'm helping them get it. The legal counsel, a woman named Ms. Herrera, leaned forward. You understand that we could pursue criminal charges, theft of district property, violation of confidentiality agreements, harassment of families by encouraging them to break legally binding contracts. Go ahead. I'll tell the judge exactly what I found. Let's see how that plays in court when you have to admit there's a coroner's report listing 38 deaths that the district has been hiding for 57 years. Fletcher's expression didn't change. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. You're not to return to any district property. We'll be changing all locks and access codes at El Paso High tonight. Who's going to work the night shift? We'll handle it internally. They had security walk me to my truck. I drove home, called Mrs. Caldwell, got her voicemail, called Maria Delgado Torres instead. They fired me, I told her, and they're changing the locks at the school. Good. That means they're scared. David is filing for a court order tomorrow to unseal all records related to the 1967 graduation. The judge is sympathetic. We might actually get somewhere. She paused. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I'm fine. Just worried about the school. The building? The people who died there. They've been trying to tell their story for decades. Now that we're finally listening, I don't know what happens next. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 11:30 p.m., I got in my truck and drove to the school. I parked a block away on Schuster, where I could see the building, but wouldn't be spotted by whoever the district had working security. The lights were on inside, more than usual. I could see people moving around in the main office. District officials, probably, going through files, removing anything that might be damaging. At 11:47 p.m., I watched the building. The lights in the main hallway flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. Then they went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the hallway in red. Through the windows, I could see figures moving. The procession. But something was different tonight. There were more of them. Not just the 34 students and 4 staff members. More. Dozens more. They filled the hallway. A crowd of people in various styles of clothing from different decades. I recognized some of the outfits. Early 2000s, 1990s, 1980s. The missing guards. Lisa Chen in her 2011 uniform. Marcus Reeves in his 2019 uniform. James Kowalski leading them all. But there were others, too. People I didn't recognize. Former staff, maybe. People who died in the building over the decades. All of them walking together in one massive procession. My phone rang. Mrs. Caldwell. Are you watching the school right now? She asked. How did you know? Because I am too. I'm parked on Mesa Street. Daniel. I've never seen Miss Many. Something's happening. The procession reached the main doors. They stood there just like the previous night, all facing the glass. But this time, they didn't just press their hands against it. They pushed. The doors opened. Not violently, not dramatically. They just swung open, like someone had unlocked them from the inside. The procession walked out onto the front steps of the school, emerging into the night air. Patricia Delgado was at the front now, leading them. She stopped on the top step and looked around, like she was seeing the world for the first time in 57 years. The others followed her out, filling the front steps, the sidewalk. They stood there in the red glow of the emergency lights, looking at the city beyond the school. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Caldwell. "They're leaving the building." I texted back. "I see them." The procession began to move again, but not in their usual formation. They scattered, walking in different directions. Some headed toward downtown, others toward the residential streets. They moved slowly, deliberately, like people taking their first steps after being confined for decades. Patricia Delgado walked down Schuster Avenue, her graduation robe trailing behind her. She passed within 20 feet of my truck. She turned her head, looked directly at me through the windshield, and she smiled. Not a sad smile, not a grateful smile, just a genuine, peaceful smile. Then she continued walking, heading south toward downtown El Paso, and faded into the darkness. One by one, the others faded too, walking a few steps, then becoming transparent, then disappearing entirely. Like they were finally allowed to leave. Like whatever had kept them bound to the school had loosened its grip. James Kowalski was the last to go. He stood on the school steps for a long moment, looking at the building. Then he turned away and walked west on Schuster, his uniform fading to nothing before he reached the corner. The emergency lights inside the school flickered back to normal. The main doors swung closed. My phone rang again. Mrs. Caldwell. "They're free," she said quietly. "After all these years, they're finally free." "What changed?" "You did. We did. We stopped hiding their story. We stopped pretending it didn't happen. That's all they ever wanted. Not revenge. Not to hurt anyone. Just to be remembered. To have their deaths acknowledged." I sat in my truck until dawn, watching the school. The building looked different in the sunrise. Lighter somehow. Less oppressive. At 7 a.m., I drove home. Slept for a few hours. Woke up to 17 missed calls and 40 text messages. The judge had ordered the district to unseal all records related to the 1967 incident. The El Paso Times was running a full investigative feature. Channel 7 was planning a special report. The families were organizing a memorial service, and the superintendent had resigned. David Escontrias called me that afternoon. The district is offering a settlement. Full disclosure of all documents. Public apology. Memorial plaque at the school. And they're offering to hold a posthumous graduation ceremony for the class of '67. Let the families finally see their loved ones honored properly. Will the families accept? We're discussing it. But I think yes. This is what they've wanted for 57 years. Recognition, truth, justice. That night, I drove past the school one more time. The building was dark, quiet. No procession at 11:47 p.m. No footsteps in the hallway. No figures in graduation robes. Just an old high school settling into the night. Whatever had kept the class of '67 bound to that building was broken. They'd told their story. The world had finally listened. And now they could rest. The memorial ceremony was scheduled for June 3rd, 2025, 58 years to the day after the original graduation that never happened. The district fought it initially, worried about liability and negative publicity, but the families held firm, and David Escontrias made it clear they'd take the fight to federal court if necessary. The superintendent's replacement, Dr. Elena Sayans, was younger, more progressive. Her first official act was to approve the ceremony and issue a formal apology on behalf of the district. What happened in 1967 was not just a tragedy, she said at a press conference. It was a deliberate erasure of 38 lives. The district's decision to hide the truth compounded the grief of the families and dishonored the memory of those we lost. We cannot undo the past, but we can finally acknowledge it with the honesty and dignity these families and these graduates deserve. The story went national. News outlets picked it up as an example of institutional cover-ups finally being exposed. Historians reached out, wanting to document everything. The El Paso County Historical Society created an archive dedicated to the class of '67. Mrs. Caldwell came out of forced retirement to help organize the ceremony. She called me 2 weeks before the event. "The families want you there," she said. "You're the one who brought this to light. You should be part of it." I was just doing what should have been done decades ago. Exactly. And that matters. She paused. "Daniel, have you been back to the school since that night?" "Know you?" "Once, during the day. It feels different. Quieter. The main hallway doesn't feel as heavy anymore, like something lifted." She took a breath. "I think they're waiting. For the ceremony. For closure." I'd been having dreams about the school. Not nightmares exactly, but vivid dreams where I walked the empty hallways and heard music playing somewhere distant. In the dreams, I'd find Patricia Delgado standing in the main hallway, looking at the photographs on the wall. "It's almost time," she'd say. "We're almost home." The week before the ceremony, I met with some of the families at Delgado's kitchen on Donathan. Maria had organized a gathering for everyone who'd lost someone in 1967. About 20 people showed up: siblings, nieces, nephews, grandchildren. Some were elderly, others middle-aged, a few in their 20s. An older woman named Carmen Herrera sat next to me. Her brother Ramon had been 17 when he died. "I was 8 years old," she said, showing me a photograph of a young man in a Letterman jacket. Ramon was going to be the first person in our family to go to college. He had a scholarship to New Mexico State. My parents never recovered from losing him. My father died in 1975. My mother in 1983. Both of them spent every day wondering why the school lied to them, why they couldn't even have a proper funeral. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be sorry. Be proud. You gave us something we thought we'd never get. The truth." She gripped my hand. "When I walk into that auditorium next week and see my brother's name read aloud, when they hand me his diploma, that's because of you. That's because you didn't look away." The gathering lasted 3 hours. People shared stories about the graduates, showed photographs, talked about the lives that had been cut short. Patricia Delgado, the valedictorian who wanted to be a teacher; Ramon Herrera, the athlete with a full ride to college; Julia Escontrias, the artist who painted murals; Sofia Marquez, the student council president who organized fundraisers for charity. 34 lives reduced to sealed files and crossed out names for nearly 6 decades. Finally being remembered. On June 2nd, the day before the ceremony, Mrs. Caldwell called me. "I went to the school this evening to check on the setup. The custodial staff has been working all week to prepare the auditorium. New sound system, new chairs, everything." Her voice was shaking slightly. "Daniel, the graduation photos in the main hallway. The class of '67 photograph. It's different." "How?" "They're smiling. All 34 of them. Real smiles, not the blank expressions we've seen. They look happy." I drove to the school that night, even though I technically wasn't supposed to be there. The building was locked, but I stood outside on Schuster Avenue, looking at the illuminated windows. At 11:47 p.m., I saw them one last time. The procession formed in the main hallway, visible through the windows. 34 students in graduation robes. But tonight, they weren't walking toward the auditorium. They were standing still, arranged in rows, like they were posing for a photograph. Patricia Delgado stood in the front row, center position. She looked directly at the window where I stood watching, raised one hand in a small wave. I waved back. The procession held their formation for exactly 1 minute. Then, together, they turned and walked toward the auditorium. I watched them disappear around the corner. At midnight, the lights in the building dimmed, then went dark. The ceremony began at 7 p.m. on June 3rd, the exact time the original graduation had been scheduled to start in 1967. The auditorium was packed. Families, community members, reporters, district officials. Dr. Syons gave opening remarks, her voice steady but emotional. Tonight we gather to complete something that should have happened 58 years ago, to honor lives that were lost and then hidden, to finally give the El Paso High School class of 1967 the recognition and dignity they deserved. A choir from the current senior class sang. A local minister gave a blessing. Then, one by one, the names were called. Patricia Ann Delgado. Maria walked to the stage and accepted a diploma, a replica of what her aunt would have received. She held it against her chest and cried. Ramon Luis Herrera. Carmen took her brother's diploma with shaking hands, kissed it. Julia Maria Scontrias, Sofia Isabel Marquez, Daniel James Ortega. Name after name, 34 students, 3 teachers, 1 principal. Each family member walking to the stage, accepting the diploma, acknowledging the life that had been taken. When the last name was called, the auditorium fell silent. Dr. Syons returned to the podium. To the class of 1967, we see you, we remember you, we honor you. Your lives mattered, your deaths mattered, and your story will never be forgotten again. The choir began, pomp and circumstance, the traditional graduation march. The families stood, holding the diplomas. Some were crying, others were smiling. All of them were finally, after decades, getting closure. I stood in the back of the auditorium, watching. Mrs. Caldwell stood next to me. "Do you feel it?" she whispered. I did. A shift in the air. A lightness. Like something heavy had been lifted from the building. The ceremony ended at 9 p.m. The families mingled, shared embraces, took photographs with the diplomas. The local news filmed everything. Reporters interviewed family members, capturing their stories for history. I stayed until everyone had left, helping Mrs. Caldwell and the custodial staff clean up. We were the last ones in the building. "You should check the main hallway," Mrs. Caldwell said, "before we leave." I walked to the main hallway alone. The graduation photographs lined the walls, decades of students smiling at the camera. I found the class of 1967 photograph and stopped. The image had changed again. The students were no longer in their formal procession poses. They were candid now, natural, caught in a moment of genuine joy. Some were laughing. Others had their arms around each other. Patricia Delgado in the front row was mid-laugh, her head tilted back, looking genuinely happy. At the bottom of the photograph, new text had appeared, as if it had always been there. El Paso High School class of 1967, 34 graduates, remembered, honored, at peace. I took a photograph of it with my phone, then walked back to where Mrs. Caldwell was waiting. "They're gone, aren't they?" I said. "Yes. Finally." She locked the front doors behind us, and we stood on the steps where the procession had emerged 2 weeks earlier. They can rest now. They got what they needed. We walked to our cars together. The school building stood silent behind us, its windows dark. For the first time in 58 years, El Paso High School was just a school again. The ghosts had graduated. I got my job back at El Paso High in August. Dr. Cyans offered it to me personally, along with a formal apology from the district for my wrongful termination. The lawsuit settlement included back pay and a letter of commendation that went in my personnel file. Mrs. Caldwell came out of retirement too, this time as the school's official historian. The district created a new position just for her, Director of Historical Preservation and Truth. Her first project was establishing a permanent memorial in the main hallway honoring the class of 1967. The memorial is beautiful, a glass case displaying photographs of all 34 students, their names engraved on brass plates beneath each image. Patricia Delgado's valedictorian speech, which her family had kept for 58 years, is framed and mounted on the wall. Next to it, the full list of everyone who died that day. Tourists come sometimes, historians, students doing research papers, people who heard about the story and wanted to pay their respects. The school doesn't hide from it anymore. They teach it. Every freshman class learns about the class of '67 as part of their orientation, about the tragedy, the cover-up, and the decades it took for the truth to finally emerge. The protocols are still in my security binder, all 7 of them, but I haven't needed to follow them since the ceremony. The hallways stay quiet after midnight. The auditorium doors remain closed. Room 237 is now a storage closet, nothing more. I haven't seen the procession since that final night before the memorial ceremony. But sometimes, when I do my rounds at night, I catch the faint scent of flowers, corsages, the kind girls wore to graduations in the 1960s. It's never threatening, never scary, just a reminder that something happened here, that people died here, that their story matters. The graduation photograph of the class of '67 still hangs in the main hallway, but it's different from all the others now. The district had it restored, professionally cleaned and reframed. The students in the photograph look genuinely happy, like they're celebrating something worth celebrating. Sometimes I stop in front of it during my rounds, just to look, to remember their names, to think about the lives they should have lived. Last week, Maria Delgado Torres stopped by the school with her daughter, a high school sophomore. They spent an hour looking at the memorial, reading the displays. Before they left, Maria found me in the security office. My daughter asked me if I believe in ghosts, she said. I told her I believe in memory. I believe that places remember the people who walked through them, and I believe that when we honor those memories, when we tell the truth about what happened, the people who were hurt can finally find peace. Her daughter, who looked remarkably like her great-aunt Patricia, nodded. That makes sense. Like, they were waiting for someone to tell their story, right? And you did. They left and I went back to my rounds. The building settles differently now. The creaks and groans that used to sound like footsteps are just old wood and metal adjusting to temperature changes. The shadows in the hallways are just shadows, nothing more. El Paso High School is just a school again. Old, historic, beautiful, full of students during the day, quiet at night. And somewhere, I like to think, 34 graduates finally got to walk across a stage, accept their diplomas, and move on to whatever comes next. They earned it. They waited 58 years for it. And now, finally, they're free.